I'm very feel.
Really sure why this is doing. Yeah, it's recording now. Recording. You got that now, yeah?
Yeah. It says in the top of the.
Fucking gives me more to edit. Okay, right. let me try this. Always try and build myself up, and as you know, I'm pretty good at typing, but I ain't so good at public speaking. You know what I mean? Right. Always comes across as goofy. Welcome to another episode of the Superfly boxing podcast presented by the Fight Site. I'm your host, McLachlan, boxing historian and general analyst for the FightSite.com. I've got a special guest with me today to discuss a topic which has been sent in by our patron Miguel, a good mate of mine. And I've got another good mate of mine on to discuss it, Jeff Thomas, who's a pro fighter, trainer, former prize fighter entrant, and a mate of mine from back in the day on the boxing forums. Jeff, how's it going?
Very good, thank you. Are you good?
I'm very good, mate, and congratulations on your recent return to the ring, a successful one.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, it was thanks very much. Yeah, it was a very good good night and a good achievement to come back after all that time away.
Now I'm going to spring this one on you because I know you used to hate it on the forums because we used to jokingly call you journeyman Jeff, but you're not actually you're not a journeyman. You know what I mean? You've got a winning record. But it's an interesting discussion because we should probably go into what it means to be a journeyman. Because for me, in modern parlance, a journeyman is someone who essentially turns up to lose. And you know, from you and me watching Channel 5 and Sky and British boxing over the years, you often see these Latvians that come in and they just fall over straight away. It teaches the prospect or the fighter nothing, the home fighter. And these guys don't put up much of a fight, but in the past, it literally meant someone who would turn up and take a fight on a minute's notice and could potentially give someone a good fight. You and I would probably look at the professional survivors of boxing nowadays, guys that don't come in to fall over, but actually look to do the rounds and provide a stiff test for a youngster. As a journeyman, would you say that's maybe not a stiff test, but you know, someone who allows a prospect to get the rounds in? Would you say that's a fair summation?
I think so. I think just like you can class your winners in different sort of regards, like, you know, prospects and champions and contenders. I think you get different classes of journeymen as well. And obviously these foreign guys who come over, no disrespect to anybody, but a lot of them, you know, don't even know how to box. Like you don't see a lot of them, to be honest, that who come over on a regular basis. But there's definitely different classes of journeymen, and you know, a lot of the international ones. Like if you look at the likes who, like Prince Patel has been boxing, and that other guy Artif Daniel, obviously they've just been boxing very, very low standard opposition, just trying to build their records. And I think you know, you compare those guys to the likes of like William Warburton and some of the guys we're going to talk about now. It's just two different levels of sportsmen entirely, I think.
Well, yeah, Warburton's a great shout, and you know, you talk about Prince Patel. He's literally fighting Hungarian gym fighters that, you know, I'm not anywhere near as experienced as you. Obviously, we talked boxing over the years, but I've seen better novices in the gym than some of these novices that Prince Patel's fighting. Is that it's not unfair to say that? Like you said before, respect to anyone who gets in the ring, but I'm pretty sure I could jump in the ring and go down for the first scuffed body shot I take. It doesn't mean you're not brave. It just means you're not necessarily good. I mean, we talk about, you know, top-notch journeymen, guys who over the years. I mean, we're going to go into some of our favourites in a bit. Historically and more recent, I've got a few myself. But you've obviously faced some of the more notable journeymen in British boxing over the last few decades. You know, Peter Buckley and Christian Light, people like that. Was there anything that you sort of impart your knowledge of those fights and sort of what did it feel like fighting one of those guys? Because a lot of people say that there's an unwritten rule, so to speak, about journeymen. You know, the good ones that, you know, they're probably more skilled than they let on. Is that fair to say?
Oh, massively, yeah. I mean, Buckley stood out. Daniel
For those who don't know, Buckley famously fought the likes of Nassim Hamid and many luminaries of the 90s.
Yeah, he was really cagey, clever boxer. Could punch a little bit. He had a little bit of pop in his shots. And he was very, very calm. He was just a very, very thorough sort of professional. Felt completely at ease in the ring, and there was just like I say, just levels to his ability. He could do a little bit of everything. And I actually spoke to Peter recently on Facebook, and we were chatting, and I can't remember what we were talking about, and he mentioned that he was a finalist in the NABCs as an amateur, so he was he was right up there in the top of the country as an amateur, so he was obviously able to, ridiculous, like 52 wins in 57 contests as an amateur or something like that. So obviously when he turned over, for whatever reason, he decided to go down a different route. But that was someone who was very talented and could have won a lot more fights if he'd have sort of maybe gone down a different route, or maybe acquitted himself slightly differently in certain fights. But yeah, I mean, the likes of Christian Lake, Christian was a really nice boxer. Like he had a nice jab, and he moved well, difficult to catch with any big shots really. And these guys, these real journeymen, the ones who actually know what they're doing, they're very canny operators, and they know how to get through the rounds and avoid real trouble. And I think there's a real skill in itself there. You know what I mean? Being able to do that week after week against hungry prospects who are trying to impress all their mates. You know what I mean?
That's the thing as well. When you do go see young fighters, it is usually, obviously I'm mates with Ryan Garner and I've watched him live a few times, and it is mainly, especially these local small shows, it is a bunch of nutty, drunk, usually geared up nippers that are seeing their mate fight, and these prospects generally do want to put on a show. Someone like Joe Pigford, he couldn't help it. He hit so hard that he would tap journeyman and take him out. But is there kind of like a unwritten rule, so to speak, in terms of if people don't realise, journeymen they often have 2 or 3 fights booked in advance. They're going to go up down the country. They've got a set wage. They're going to turn up, do the rounds, and as long as they don't get damaged in any way, or if it is an official stoppage, the British board will allow them to continue fighting. So the concern for a journeyman is if they do get a stoppage on their record, they're going to stop earning for a couple of months. This is a full-time job for some of them. So is there some sort of unwritten rule in sense of, I mean, I'm sure a promoter isn't. I don't want to say that promoters going into the changing rooms, or not. Journeyman might not even have a changing room, but saying to look, I've told my guy not to go too hard on you. Will you not go too hard on him? Or is it just something that's understood?
I think every fight is different. I'd imagine that it's all about sort of damage limitation, isn't it? Like boxing is really the art of hitting and not getting hit. So if you're in a boxing ring and you're able to negotiate the rounds and win handily without ending up in a Marco Antonio Barrera Morales type struggle, then you're going to try not to do that, especially every week. So I'm not sure. Like it's not really an unwritten rule, but I'd say like the most important thing a lot of the time when you're boxing on these shows, especially when they're on the small hall shows where you're just trying to build a bit of a record and you're trying to create opportunities to make some decent money on TV, is just getting the win. So obviously, if someone isn't massively ambitious, you don't necessarily have to you don't have to put all your cards on the table, do you, to try and win the fight. You can just box reservedly within yourself and get that win. And I suppose that's maybe the difference between boxers at my level and the likes of champions. That maybe that's the difference, really. Perhaps they're willing to go that little bit further against journeyman. But I think there is probably, you're right in some ways that these journeymen can get through the rounds, and they're I think sometimes a prospect will just get the rounds out, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes I would imagine that these little 4-round contests for a prospect is a chance for them to deploy what they've been training in the gym. So it is good to get the rounds in and see if it works in a proper fight context, so to speak. Although, there's instances along the way where they might have put their punches together a bit too well and stopped someone that's typically quite durable. But we're looking at who the very best journeymen are, guys that stand out to us. I mean, I've got a couple historically that probably fit more of the old school kind of journeyman role, where someone would turn up and could legitimately win. But what I find with the older journeymen, and you'll know this, Jeff, is that oftentimes they weren't so much paid losers, so to speak, but they were limited. So what you would tend to do is you'd get your fighter out against, say, someone who was only really good at jabbing. He's never going to go to the top level, this guy, but he's well known for having a good jab. And then you might get a guy who's known for being really heavy-handed, but he has no application whatsoever. So if your prospect can get through this guy, you think, right, it's kind of like playing a video game. You work your way up, you take on a puncher maybe, then you get a guy who's a bit of a spoiler maybe, and you're basically initiating a fighter in all the different styles he'll come up against when he moves up through the ranks. So my guys are more along that sort of line, but I'd be really interested to know who your favourite journeyman is and why. And one of the parts of the question that Miguel asked us was, we talked about Peter Buckley earlier, and you might be able to bring this into your guy, but what if these guys were let off their leash? What if, say, Peter Buckley or whoever you choose said, do you know what, this is a nice steady earner, but I would like to use all of my skills? How far could they have gone? Is it a case of letting these guys off the leash? They could have been more than they were, or is it a case of them finding a niche and actually this was the correct life for them?
That's a great question, actually, because just thinking about it while you were putting the question there, I was thinking about what you were saying, and it's funny because someone can be really, really skillful, but have poor or average punching technique. So that sounds ridiculous for a pro boxer and someone who's respected. But that you do see that, like when I love watching boxing, and obviously completely forgetting from a fighter point of view, because I coach completely different to how I fight. But if I look at boxing from a coaching point of view, I watch some journeymen and they have these beautiful defenses. I'm gonna give you one. Give you an example now of one, and this is no disrespect to him at all, because I think he's an excellent fighter. He was an excellent fighter back in the day. But Sid Razak. Now Sid Razak was a journeyman a few years ago, and his defense was absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. He was lovely at slipping and rolling shots. I remember watching him one year. Watching him in one fight, and I was absolutely shocked at how good he was. Like I couldn't believe how clever and tidy he was. I think he was boxing. I think it was James Kavanagh.
Yeah,
James Kavanagh, and he actually caught Kavanagh with some really good shots in that fight as well. But what really impressed me was just how good he was at defending. And for me, to be a good journeyman, you have to have a really good switched on defense. Like if you're going to be a journeyman for any sort of prolonged period of time. Now when you're throwing punches, it's sometimes it's different. You often watch journeymen when they do actually start loading shots. They're very messy. The punches can be quite scrappy. Their skills lie somewhere else almost. So whilst they can box a little bit, they're actually you're right what you're saying in some ways, that they've almost found what they're good at, and what they're good at is anticipating shots and being able to deflect things and see things come in, and having good awareness and good eyesight and good vision for what's coming in. And I think that's a different part of boxing. That's like a really world-class fighter can do it all, but these journeymen, they might have a really world-class defense. Someone like Peter Buckley, rarely got stopped if anyone, and he ventured into world class quite a few times, and he only stopped a handful of times.
Very unique defensive fighter as well, Buckley.
Yeah, that cross-arm defense. Yeah.
So I always thought if you had one of Buckley's fights on film rather than tape, and you sort of dropped a few frames out of it and didn't show the ending, that you might think he was one of these old-time sort of legends. You know what I mean? Like, he really did have a really unique little style about him, and it worked for him. Like you say, he found something that worked for him. Sid Razak, by the way, fought one of my actual best mates, Wade Armour, who I think retired undefeated in the end, who's a really good mate of mine, has been for my whole life essentially, and I've actually seen him fight myself. So he was a tricky fighter. There was a guy. I'm gonna get back to you in a second, but I always used like he was like a journeyman, but it was always times where this guy could jump out and almost be really good. Yusuf Al Hamidi, do you remember Al Hamidi?
Oh yes, yeah, very very good.
I saw him fight. I think it was on the Mitchell Katsinas undercard. I saw him fight Ricky Burns, who you fought.
Yeah.
And Ricky Burns at that point, he hadn't fought for the world title, I don't think. And Al Hamidi made Burns look so pedestrian. I thought there was no chance that he was going to win the WBO fight when he fought Rocky Martinez. Yeah. And obviously he got dropped early, and I thought, Burns is going nowhere. I've watched him a few times, but I watched him in person. He just wasn't impressive. And obviously he did. He went on to become a quote unquote, because being a historian here, I'm not going to give him too much credit, a freeweight world champion. And Burns was a really good operator, and Al Hamidi did not make him look good at all. Do you know what I mean? And he's a really good fighter. But if you had to pick one, Jeff, if you had to pick one journeyman, one guy, and give us a little breakdown of why you rate them and what you think they could have done.
Well, and the other result Al Hamidi had, just while we're on him, obviously he beat Crawler as well.
He did beat Crawler, yeah.
Yeah, he beat Crawler as well.
That's a good journeyman.
Yeah, and he gave John Murray a really good fight as well.
He did.
And he gave Gomez a really good fight, Michael Gomez. I was at that one actually. But yeah, he was a talented lad. I think he was a good. Sorry, sticking on him, but I think he was actually quite a good amateur. Al Hamidi. He was Syrian. But
I think he's from Syria, yeah.
Yeah, but I think he was a good amateur, and he might have boxed. I'm sure he boxed in some championships against. There's a guy who had two names, but they were both the same. I can't think what his name is. I'm sorry. You'll have to look.
Hussein.
Something like that. It wasn't Hussein. There's a British guy, a guy who boxed in Britain, and I can't think what his name was. And he was in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think it was. And he boxed him in the amateurs. And this guy was a really good world class prospect. He didn't actually make it in the end, but he was a really good fighter. And I think Al Hamidi boxed him in the World Championships or something like that. I remember reading something about that. But yeah, Al Hamidi's another one, a lovely boxer. He is, he's a talented guy, and he picks up the odd win now and again, doesn't he?
Yeah,
he was quite good. I quite enjoyed watching him. Like I say, he was a talented lad. He knew how to box. But going on to sort of my favourite journeyman. Obviously, I like a lot of the current guys, like Chris Jenkinson's one that doesn't get thrown about a lot, but he's a really really nice lad, but he can bunch a little bit, and he's got a nice tidy style, good boxer. Obviously William Warburton, but going back a few years ago, my favourite journeyman was a guy that not many people would have heard of now, but a guy called Paul Wesley. And Paul Wesley, you have to box wreck him, right? His record, I'm going to read it to you now: 16 wins, six by knockout, 50 losses and 5 draws. Okay, so he looks like a complete non-puncher. 6 stoppages out of all those 71 bouts. But actually, he was an absolute dangerman throughout his career. Not so much towards the end, but he was a real dangerous operator. So if you just go through his record a little bit, I'm just on it now on BoxRec. He beat. Hang on a second. 1991, he beat Neville Brown.
Wow.
He was the British champion. He
Yeah.
stopped him in the first or second round. That was a legit stoppage when he was just on some bill. He picked up a draw with a guy called Tony Collins, who was a really good fighter. He then went the distance with Sambu Kalumbe. This is when he started stepping up. It was just he picked up some really good wins. He knocked out a guy called Paul Silky Jones, who was WBO world champion.
Indeed, he was.
Stopped him in 2 rounds. Went the distance with Chris Pyatt. Beat a guy called Warren Stowe, who's a good fighter. And then he ended up in a series of bouts. He had an absolute thriller with a guy called Gilbert Jackson. That was an absolute brilliant fight. I think it went about 6 rounds, but he nearly knocked him out. Glenn Catley, he had an absolute thriller with Glenn Catley. That was an absolute
WBO super middleweight champion.
Yeah. He was, and then after that he sort of started tailing off after that, and he went on quite a big losing run. But actually, when he was sort of active, I was fascinated by him. But when I was younger, I was way more obsessive about boxing than I am now. And I just remember watching him on TV, and I remember thinking, fucking hell, how is that his record? Like he is literally a really good fighter. And I think the first time I saw him was the Gilbert Jackson fight, and Jackson was like this big. Have you ever heard of Gilbert Jackson? He was like a big punches. His record was like 14 wins, 1 loss with about 12 knockouts. He was a really good prospect, and he fought Ensley Bingham for the British title, and he was a favourite in that fight, and Ensley Bingham beat him. But Wesley had him all over the place, and he was so close to winning that fight. And again, even when in the Glenn Catley fight, that was another one. He was 1 or 2 punches away from winning that. He was a really talented performer. Like he was a dangerous guy as well. Like not hardly anyone stopped him when he was in his prime, and he was like we talk about these guys who really test people. He was really testing people. He was a skillful operator. And he could punch a little bit as well.
See, I never did watch Gilbert Jackson, which is mad, because I have watched a lot of Ensley Bingham, which obviously because if you're competing at the level he was, I tend to went for a bit of a boxing back call it Boxing Forum 24. But obviously when me and you were on there, it was Eastside Boxing, and we used to talk about Ensley Bingham there quite a lot. So I've seen a few of his fights. I don't think I have seen Gilbert Jackson. And I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure I've seen Wesley because the name rings a bell on one of them. Do you remember them amazing compilations we used to get where it was like, it was the boxer, a little bit like McLachlan.
Which one?
It was called like St. George something or other, and he looked like.
Georgie Smith.
Yeah. So all these compilations had all knockouts from like him on it, and whenever they used to import like this Canadian guy who'd come over and banjo people and stuff, and I'm sure that Wesley must have had a knockout on that because
he might have done,
because they used they were always like the best 100 knockouts you've ever seen, and they were just all the knockouts that like Channel 4 KO TV had the rights to, but they were always like vicious knockouts, and always loads of Georgie Smith and that on there and stuff like that. So I might have seen him, but that's a new name to me, which is great.
There's definitely a fight with him and Steve Collins. He fought Steve Collins. And again he gave Steve Collins a fairly decent fight as well.
Maybe I have seen him. Maybe I have seen him.
YouTube, that one. It was before Collins moved up to super middleweight, but I think it was after he was world champion though. I'm not 100% on that one, but
you just said to me that he faced Sambu Kalumbe, so I mean if that fight's available I would have seen it because I'm pretty sure. If anyone's seen everything out there of Kalumbe, it'd be me. So, I love Kalumbe. He's one of the most brilliant fighters. It's mad you say that because we literally had a request from this from another patron about Sambu Kalumbe. That's what they wanted a piece on. So So I mean, obviously, I find that as I get older, the more I bang on about fighters, just like the wise old. Boxing historians I used to look up to, they'd bang on about fighters and I'd get into them, and now younger people are saying to me, who's this guy you're on about and who's this guy on about? And now I'm like the cantankerous old bastard telling them, you must watch Sambu Kalambai. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for me, I won't go that far back because similar to the Wesley you just described, Darnell Boone for me a few years back was in a similar vein. If you look at his record, 24 wins, 25 losses, 5 draws, and only 13 knockouts. So it doesn't sound that impressive. Knocked out Adonis Stevenson. Badly dropped Andre Ward.
Yeah, I've seen that.
When he dropped after that fight, Andre Ward, I mean, I think that was when he was at middleweight Ward. No one was really high on Ward. I think it's easy to forget, but going into the fight with Kessler in the Super 6, I think Andre Ward he had the widest odds out of anyone to win the whole tournament. Crazy to think it now. He pissed the whole thing. He dropped or badly hurt Kovalev and gave Kovalev a really tough fight over 10, and later lost the rematch. I don't think the first fight is actually out there though. The knockout of Stevenson is he beat Willie Monroe Jr., who was undefeated at the time, and famously fought Golovkin and Billy Joe Saunders later than that. But generally, like, Boone's one of these sort of fighters. It's like he'd always turn up the fight, but like he wasn't that great. Like he had really good timing on his right hand, but outside of that, he wasn't really that great. He was quite a strong guy, and he sort of come forward of a high guard and sort of took shots on the elbows and just fiddled through fights. But there was always this kind of danger with this guy and it must have been horrendous matching a prospect with him, because there was always this danger that he might fork a big one at you, because he was one of the most venomous punchers I've ever seen in my life. You know what I mean? Like, he was such a dangerous banger. I mean, Ward looked like being punched to another dimension. I guess at the time it was like, oh, he got dropped by a journeyman. When you look back, it kind of did show how good Ward was, that he was resilient enough to survive that guy. And yeah, I mean, it was just a really interesting fighter for me. Whenever he was fighting, I'd always want to watch him, because you would really see what a prospect was made of. And for me, going back to our initial discussion, that's what a great journeyman should be. It should be someone who tests you and okay, if your prospect can circumnavigate this Darnell Boone's right hand, and he fought a lot of guys as well. He fought Craig McEwen and he fought a lot of like up and coming prospects that didn't end up being all that great, but he really was a dangerous fighter, and he reminds me of like the middleweights from the 60s, where you see these guys turning up on the records of every great middleweight going, and sometimes they won. Another guy which I've always been interested in is a guy called Saul Montana, and he's a Mexican. I've actually found some footage of him, because I was trying to find footage of and I'm going to go on one of my tangents here, Jeff, so try not to fall asleep. A Thai flyweight from the 60s called Venice Borkasaw is one of my favourite fighters ever. He's this kind of mythical like danger man, but he won the WBC flyweight championship and was robbed of the WBC bantamweight title. So I'm always trying to find footage of him, and the only footage I could find outside of the bantamweight title fight was against this guy called Saul Montana. And Montana actually wins the first Borkasaw fight. I did a bit of research. The footage I've got is from Mexican TV. The commentary's in Spanish. They only managed to show the bare minimum highlights of Montana, and everything you see that's good is done by the Thai, but he loses the decision in Mexico. So it goes to say it's obviously a home cooking kind of thing. They can't find any highlights of the Mexican, and he somehow wins the decision. But let me just run through some of the opponents that he faced. I mean, I'll start at the end of his career and sort of work back earlier on, because that's the way BoxRec is. I know most of these off by heart, but I sort of want to go through them really. You got the last fight that we got on record from him. His record, by the way, is horrendous. It's not great at all. It's, in terms of numbers, it doesn't look good. It's 26 wins, 20 losses, and 2 draws. Right? It's not terrible, but he's clearly not great. But look at who they matched him against. He fought Rene Arredondo, who's a future super featherweight champion. Jose Luis Ramirez, who is former lightweight champion. Salvador Sanchez, when he was 13-0. Well, we know Salvador Sanchez is one of the greatest featherweights of all time. Bazooka Limon. This 3-fight skid, right? 1975 in December, he fights Alexis Arguello. Wow. 6 months later, he fights Bazooka Limon, and 4 months after that, he fights Salvador Sanchez, and he loses all of them. he fought, as I say, Rodolfo Martinez, who was a really, really, really good Mexican bantamweight. Venice Borkasaw a couple of times. Regilio Lara. This guy is losing every other fight, essentially. And more often than not, I mean, Arguello stopped him. And Arredondo stopped him in his last fight. But he doesn't really. He gets stopped 11 times out of 20, and you see who he's fighting. He isn't getting stopped against all these legitimate world class fighters. And in the footage, he looks like a scrappy kind of spoiling Mexican type. I mean, he's got a bit on the inside. He basically seems to hang on for dear life. But clearly, this was a guy who was really reliable fighter. And I'd love to see more footage of him fighting these other greats, because I find that if you can watch 3 or 4 world-class fighters against the same journeyman, you might learn as much about that fighter than you would if they were fighting each other. Do you know what I mean? If you can compare the performances against the same, not even journeyman, but the same opponent. You know what I mean? It's always good to see, oh, he did this and he did that. And like you said earlier, sometimes a world-class fighter might be a bit more capable against a journeyman and might look a bit flash. I mean, sometimes we look at British cards, and if you see someone knock out a journeyman, you know, or stop you think, oh, they're one to look out for in terms of being a prospect. I don't know if you can still measure fighters like that, but that's certainly what I do. If I see someone,
I always keep like if I see, you know, if I see someone gets, one of the decent journeymen gets stopped, you always end up paying a little bit more attention. And they do tend to, like, if someone's going to go on to big things, they do tend to get through those journeymen usually inside the distance. A few of them, don't they?
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, it's a really interesting and vital part of our sport, you know. And I think, okay, you and I did kind of start off by throwing a bit of shade at these random Hungarians and Latvians. You know, we give them the respect. It is. I joked I'll be able to do it. I won't be able to do it as often as they do, and that's the difference. But to be a really good journeyman, like you touched on, you do have to be pretty much elite at something, because there are guys that might lose 200 times and only get stopped 5 times. That is a serious talent.
Yeah. I was just thinking of one before, a heavyweight, Kyle. I can't think what his name is now. Marion, what was his name? He'd be a good one. You'll have to pause this on the on the recording. Let me just see if I can find him. He's I can't remember if Riddick Bowe boxed him. He was tough as fuck.
You know about Marion Wilson?
Marion Wilson, that's it. Yeah,
he was never knocked out.
Yeah, that's unbelievable, isn't it?
He's one of those guys. Well. He's one of those guys who you can look at him fighting a lot of different guys and see how they dealt with him.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, that is incredible. Look, Oliver McCall twice, Sam Peter, Tony Thompson, Hasim Rahman, Larry Donald, Maskiev, Jefferson,
Abayabuchi,
Sellers. That is absolutely sensational.
Yeah, Galata, Briggs, Kirk Johnson, Mavrovich, who famously gave Lennox Lewis a really hard fight, Ray Mercer, Vaughan Bean, Galata again, Tyrell Biggs, Carl the Truth Williams, Franz Bofer. Oh my god, yeah, it is an intimidating list.
Yeah, sensational that. And he beat Mike Hunter as well, which is a decent win. Mike Hunter was a good fighter.
Mike Hunter Senior, that would be. So Marion Wilson basically is like we talk about guys who'd survive. And I don't know if anyone hasn't seen some of his fights, he did actually get involved in some fights as well. And the amount of fighters that he faced that were legitimate bangers, and probably one of the great, in my opinion, the 90s into the 90s in general, the 80s into the 90s, but even the 90s into the very early 2000s, I think is one of the few true heavyweight golden ages. And this guy was a born survivor, essentially. He could take anything. There were a lot of heavyweights at that point that had incredible chins. People like Larry Donald and Ray Mercer, obviously.
McCall as well, yeah.
McCall, obviously. And you know, they would get involved in tear-ups with guys that were actually, you know, actively trying to take their head off. But Marion Jones didn't exactly get it easy. We reeled off just a part of his resume, and it's absolutely insane. So it goes to show again, you know. And I tell you what, trying to be a journeyman in that era of heavyweights ain't the easiest business at all.
No, no, and they were all punchers as well. Like you look at the guys who were fighting. They were all big hitters, weren't they? He really stands out, to be honest. Like looking at his stats, just it's crazy reading.
I think that was a really good chat, Jeff, and it's really good to have you on at last, mate. Do you want to sort of tell everyone about what you're sort of up to outside the rings? Obviously, you're doing really well with your training, especially when you've got someone like me advising you, old school tactics and whatnot. So, you want to give everyone a rundown? You never know, might be someone in the Lancs area who's looking to get into boxing. You ever want to tell anyone what you're up to?
Yeah, obviously, just so obviously I'm fighting myself now. I'm just gonna have a last couple of seasons, with the idea hopefully to try and pick up a central area title and try and have a couple of big fights in the next couple of years. Obviously, once this coronavirus stuff sorts itself out. But from a coaching point of view, I've got I've been coaching for quite a while now. I've got Dan Catlin coming through, who's a really good prospect. He's 5-0 so far. Scored a spectacular knockout in his last fight, and he's a really good prospect, and he's improving all the time. And then I've also got another lad who's having a bit of a break from boxing at the moment, Alex McLachlan, really talented lad. He's 12 wins, no losses, and 1 draw. And then obviously Dan's 5-0, so they're doing really well so far, and they're progressing nicely.
But for now, that's me, Carl McLachlan, thanking you, Jeff Thomas, for coming on the Superfly Boxing Podcast.
Thanks very much.
I'm very Phil.